again. Welcome back to Chat About That. I'm your host, Bella, and in today's episode, I'm going to be chatting about my favorite movies, why I love them so much, and why you should watch them too. Before I start chatting about that, I wanted to give you a few little updates. So I actually registered my podcast with a service called Anchor because they actually publish your podcast to other hosting services, which is so exciting. So now you can actually listen to my podcast on Spotify and Google Podcasts and also a few other sites as well. So check out the link in the description or somewhere on the page for a link to the Anchor site to check out where you can listen to the podcast. I also created a YouTube channel for those of you who might not be able to access the other sites. So thank you so much to Anchor for hooking me up, and I'm so excited, and let me know where you're listening to this. I also decided in each episode I will be promoting a company, a person, or product that I really want my listeners to check out. So in this episode, I'm going to be promoting a musician, but more on that later. In the last episode, at the end, I briefly recommended a couple of different movies that I thought you guys should check out, and that really inspired me for this episode. And I decided for this episode I really want to talk about my favorite movies, like all-time favorite movies. I won't be mentioning any movies that are part of a series or a trilogy because honestly I think I could just make a whole separate podcast dedicated to those films. So maybe in the future, I'll do some rankings of my favorite Harry Potter films or Star Wars or something like that. Also, these are just a few of my favorite movies. Some of the Star Wars films and some of the Harry Potter films are actually some of my favorite movies, and just wanted to skip those for now. So I hope that's okay with you guys. I've seen so many movies throughout my life, and I feel like every couple of years my opinions change, but the movies that I'm going to be talking about today are all-time favorite movies. These are ones that I consider like holy grail desert island films. Like if I was stuck on a desert island, I would want these films for me to watch. And if you guys like this, I'm totally up for making another episode dedicated to more movies that I like and maybe trying to pick a couple of different genres. So let's get started. The first movie I want to chat about is actually my number one favorite movie of all time. And if you know me, you already know what I'm going to say. The Princess Bride. I love this movie. I'm smiling about how much I love this movie. It is seriously the best movie of all time. You could fight me on this. It is the best movie of all time. I actually saw it for the first time when I was probably in like 5th or 6th grade, and I instantly fell in love with it. I can distinctly remember where I was sitting, who I was with, and some of my original thoughts on the film, and that stuck with me throughout my whole life. And when I literally say this is my favorite movie, I am not lying. If you put this movie on mute, I can literally tell you every single thing they're saying. Like, I know every single line to this movie, word for word. I know all of the expressions people are making. I know all of the inflections in their voices. I know all of the background music. Everything about this movie. I am obsessed. And every time it's on TV, I watch it. I make my friends watch it who haven't seen it. And if they don't like it, I honestly reevaluate my friendship with them because I just don't understand how people don't like this movie. I actually don't think I've met anybody who doesn't like this movie, but if there is anybody out there who doesn't like this film, I don't know if I can be friends with you. And it was released back in 1987, and according to my mom and the internet, the film wasn't actually instantly really successful or really popular. It did well in the box office, but it wasn't an instant hit. But after it was released on home video, I can't believe I'm saying the phrase home video because that seems so foreign to me now. But after it was released on home video, it became an instant cult classic. People just really fell in love with it. The film stars a lot of really, really good actors. It stars Cary Elwes, Robin Wright, who Robin Wright is also in one of my other favorite movies, Forrest Gump, Mandy Patinkin, Wallace Shawn, Andre the Giant, and Chris Sarandon. And fun fact, I actually met Chris Sarandon. I met him at AwesomeCon last year, and it was really, really special. Cary Elwes was also at AwesomeCon last year. I wasn't able to meet him, and I think Wallace Shawn was there, and I think Mandy Patinkin was also at AwesomeCon, but the only one that I was able to meet was Chris Sarandon, and he's actually in one of my other favorite movies, which I'm going to be mentioning later in the episode. So I think meeting him out of everybody was the most special, and the person that I actually wanted to meet the most because he's in 2 of my favorite films. Another reason why this movie is so cool is because it's a story within a story. So it begins with this sick little boy. He's in bed and he's, he hasn't been able to leave and go anywhere. Totally can relate because of this quarantine, but he's in bed and he's sick, and his mom is like, hey, grandpa's gonna come over and he's gonna read you a story. And he's like, why is he gonna come over? Like, grandpa's old, he's boring. And then the grandpa comes in and he's like, I'm gonna read you this story and you're gonna sit there and you're gonna like it. And the story that he reads is The Princess Bride, which follows the story of Princess Buttercup, who's played by Robin Wright. And she lives on this farm, and she has this farm boy who is Wesley, Cary Elwes, and she falls in love with him. She falls in love with Wesley, and one day Wesley goes on, he goes on a ship, and it gets captured by the dread pirate Roberts, and she never sees him ever again. And she's very sad. So a couple years later, she's still grieving from Wesley, but she gets picked by Prince Humperdinck to marry him. So she doesn't really have a choice, which is kind of problematic, but she is going to marry Prince Humperdinck. And then one day she's riding her horse out in the field, and the band of traveling goons, they kidnap her and are basically like, we can kidnap the princess and we can start a war with the other people. Not going to go into the whole thing because it's kind of confusing. But basically she ends up on this journey with them, and then she actually meets the man in black, who looks very similar to a character who was mentioned earlier. So if you've never seen this movie, I'm not going to spoil it, but you can figure it out. I figured it out, and I was like 10 when I watched this movie the first time, so you can figure it out. So basically that is the plot of the movie. But yeah, so she goes on this adventure with the man in black, and Prince Humperdinck tries to find her, and he gets her back, and then, the traveling goons, they have a lot more depth to them, and you really like them. And there's also ROUSs, and if you don't know what that stands for, clearly you have never seen this movie, or you were never paying attention when you watched this movie, but that's probably one of my favorite scenes with the ROUSs. So if you know what that means, you know what it means, and it's probably your favorite scene too. That's basically the overview of the main plot of the movie. And then the little boy and his grandpa, they come in and out in the film. And the little boy, he starts off being, he's annoyed. He's sad because he's sick and he doesn't really like the story, and he's not really into romance, and he doesn't really want to hear about the kissing scenes. But, he changes, and he has a lot of character development within the story. And I think that's really sweet as well. But I do want to talk about more specific things about why I like it. And it goes back to nostalgia, which that plays into a couple other films on this list as well, because I have such fond memories of watching this for the first time, like I mentioned earlier, and then watching it with my mom and my sister and my friends. And again, like I mentioned earlier, every time it's on TV, I watch it. I watch it with my family. My dad even likes this movie. And it isn't just one genre. It covers literally every genre. And I think that's why so many people like this film, and why no matter who you are, you can find something about this film that you like, because it's not just romance, which I don't like romance movies, and I'm going to mention that a little bit more later, but it's comedy, it's action adventure, it's fantasy, it's got pirates, and it's got thieves, and it's got kings and princesses and fighting, and just it has something for everybody. And I think that's why it's so universal and why so many people love this movie. And even though it was made in the 80s, I feel like it still holds up today. And I think that, yes, it's a little campy, but I think that's kind of why it's interesting, because it's a little campy and a little quirky, but it still holds up today. And you have your classic bad guys, but you still kind of find yourself liking all the characters, even the bad ones and even the villains. You like them. Like, there's something interesting and endearing about all the characters. And this is a movie where there is no scene or no part in the movie, at least in my opinion, that's cringy. Like, you know, sometimes when you watch older movies, or even, I guess, any movie, most of the time you can pinpoint like one scene that either goes on way too long or is super cringy or super awkward, and you kind of just wish that it wasn't in the movie. There's no scene like that in this movie. Every scene keeps you intrigued and it keeps you engaged, and you just want to see what goes on. And even if you've seen it a million times, it's such a nostalgic classic movie that every time you watch it, you re-fall in love with it. And again, I think I could make an entire separate podcast, like not an episode, like an actual podcast just about The Princess Bride, where I can analyze the film and study every single scene and character and share little known facts. And I just think that there's so much depth to the film and the characters that I could just talk about it forever. But I'll leave you with this. If you've seen this film, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying is totally true. The clash of genres, the likable characters, the memorable lines, it just keeps you coming back again and again, and it keeps you interested, and it keeps you loving this film. And if you haven't seen this movie, which now, because we're quarantined, you really have no excuse not to watch movies. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you watch it and experience the magic that is The Princess Bride. The second movie I want to chat about is one that came out a couple of years ago, and it's called About Time. And it's actually a romantic comedy. And like I said earlier, and if you know me, I hate romance movies. I hate overly sappy romance movies. Like, I've actually never seen The Notebook, and I never will, because honestly, to me, it looks horrible, and I probably would fall asleep. And it's just, I don't like overly romantic, sappy movies, because I find that the characters are just annoying, and I don't want to watch a movie about like two sappy people falling in love. Like, it's not really me. And I don't hate love or anything like that. There are plenty of romantic comedies that I really enjoy. And I'm going to be talking about why I like this one specifically. But there are a decent amount of romantic comedies that are really, really funny and really cool. But I tend to like the ones that are more funny than romantic. And I could also probably go on a rant about how much I hate Titanic. Oh my God, I might have to make a whole episode just about movies that I hate because there's a couple of them. But About Time it's much more than a rom-com. This movie came out in 2013, and I actually saw it for the first time in college during a screening of the film at our campus coffee shop. And it was right after the movie left theaters, but it was before it went to DVD. Because my college actually did this program where they would have screenings of different movies that were, you know, in between theater and home release, which was actually really cool. And fun fact, also, I actually ran that program for a little bit in college, which was really cool. So like I said, the film came out in 2013, so I saw it around then. And I remember seeing the trailer for the film, and I really wanted to see it, but I just wasn't able to. And I remember who I was with when I went and saw it. I remember sitting in the coffee shop. I remember the spot I was sitting in. I had actually had a really good spot. And I just immediately fell in love with it. The movie stars Domhnall Gleeson, who you probably mostly recognize him from playing General Hux in the new Star Wars films. He was also in Ex Machina. He also starred in that movie with Oscar Isaac, who plays Poe in the new Star Wars, which I always think it's funny when actors are in movies together and then they're in another movie together. I don't know. I'm like fascinated by that too. This movie also stars Rachel McAdams, who was in The Notebook. I feel like all these movies like are related to each other in some weird way. Anyway, Rachel McAdams, she does a really great job in this movie. Bill Nighy, who I love him. He was in Love Actually. He also played Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean. And then he wasn't the Minister of Magic in Harry Potter, but he was the guy who took over after Minister of Magic died. Oh my God. We're not going to get into Harry Potter because I could just talk about that all day. Anyway, also Margot Robbie, she makes an appearance in this film, who I love Margot Robbie. And like I said, About Time, it isn't a typical rom-com because the main character can travel through time. And I feel like this adds a lot of depth to the film. I guess this is considered magical realism. Is that what that's called? And to be honest, if there wasn't the time travel element to this film, I don't think it would be as interesting. And I honestly don't think that I would like it as much. So with the time travel, with that, The main character, Tim, Donald Gleason, he learns early in the film that his father can also time travel. His father's Bill Nighy. He can travel through time, and all the men in their family can travel through time. They don't really go into like the reasoning behind this and the lore behind it. It's just there. It's just in the film, and they don't really, like, obviously the whole movie is focused on him traveling through time and doing different things. So the time travel is a big element to it, but they don't go in depth talking about that, which I like. I like that it's just a part of his life and they don't really explain it too much. Like I like that that's kind of open-ended in a sense. And the movie focuses on what he does with this gift. And he decides that he's going to use it to make his life better. And he wants to relive moments in his life and help him find what he truly wants out of life, because that's what his father tells him. He says you should use this gift to make your life better and do what you can to give yourself the best life. And what he wants out of life is to find the love of his life. He moves out of his parents' house. He goes and lives with his dad's friend, who's this cranky old screenplay writer. He's like such a curmudgeon, but he's like so hilarious. He goes on a blind date and he meets Mary, who's Rachel McAdams. He has a great time with her, and then he uses his time travel to go help the guy who's a screenwriter, and basically that erases the whole date. So he has to go back in time again to meet her a different way. So he uses this gift to find her and fall in love with her. And that's basically the plot and basically, like, I guess a summary. But there's a lot more that goes on to it. His sister is in the film, and his sister is really troubled, and he helps her. And his dad is older, and he has an uncle who has some mental issues. And there's I feel like the characters are very dynamic as well, considering that the uncle has a lot of mental issues. The sister has her own issues in a sense, and the father has the wisdom of being able to time travel, and he can give him advice, and he has a really close relationship with his parents. And I think the reason I really enjoy this film, similar to why I like The Princess Bride, is that it has a lot of different genres in it. Obviously romance and comedy, but I think with the time travel element, it has a sci-fi feel as well. So I think people who like that kind of genre and really like time travel would like this film. And I do like it because it's more funny than romantic. The characters are likable, and I actually like that the main character is a man. Now, I am 100% a feminist, and I prefer watching movies with female main characters, but I think that the reason why I don't like romance movies is because the women are normally portrayed in a bad light. They come off as like desperate and needy, and they're just like, I feel like they're all the same. But I feel like this movie works really well because Tim is just, he's not like a typical guy. He's really nice. He isn't trying to use his powers to like get with a bunch of women and, you know, go off and do crazy stuff. Like, he is really a genuinely nice guy, and he just wants to find the one. And I think that's really sweet. And I do think the film would work if the main character was a woman, but I don't have any issues with the main character being a man. And I do want to talk about one scene towards the end of the film, and it always makes me cry. Okay. And I rarely cry at films. Like, the opening scene of Up didn't even make me cry. Like, I didn't shed a single tear at the opening scene of Up. But the scene is at the end of the film. It was towards the end of the film. It's with his father, and they go back in time to relive a memory of them when Tim was a child, and it's just so sweet. And within the context of the movie, it's bittersweet. I don't want to give it away, but it's really, really sweet and emotional, and I cry like a baby every time, and I never cry at movies. So if that worries you, don't let that deter you from watching this movie. It's so good. Another reason why I think this film in particular is really good is because Richard Curtis directed this, and he also directed Love Actually, which Bill Nighy was in. He also directed Four Weddings and a Funeral, which is a really good film, and Bridget Jones' Diary, which I've actually never seen any of the Bridget Jones' movies. So I'll have to check those out. But Love Actually is also one of my other favorite films, but I didn't include it on this list, so maybe next time I'll go into detail about that movie. But yeah, I just find About Time to be really sweet, and every time I watch it, like, it just makes me smile. And the music in the film is really good. It fits in really well with the overall aesthetic, because it has an overall like quirky aesthetic to it, which I really like because I'm kind of a quirky person. So I think that the characters all have a really strong personality, and the time travel element brings a lot of depth to the film. And if you haven't seen this film, please give it a watch. I promise you won't regret it, and it's really interesting, and I think you'll really like it. Before I get into my next movie recommendation, I want to talk about that musician that I mentioned earlier. And this musician has been creating music since he was 16 years old. He goes by the name of MCGtherapper, all one word. And I actually went to college with him because I'm friends with him on social media. I saw a few months ago that he announced that he was working on a hip hop EP with original songs, and I was just immediately intrigued because I studied music technology in college, and as a musician I was just really excited to see what he was working on. So that caught my interest. And his music, he draws from life experiences, and he creates music about his life, about love, and just anything that comes to his mind. And his music is inspired by artists like Tyler the Creator and Childish Gambino. So if you like that type of music, I think you'll really love MCGtherapper. If I'm honest though, I am not the biggest hip-hop fan. I'm not really into rap music, but I really like his style of music. The style, the aesthetic, the songs, they kind of remind me of like old school 90s hip-hop, which I like. I like that kind of genre. So if this sounds like music that you'd be interested in, I highly recommend that you check him out. I love supporting up-and-coming artists, and especially people that I know. I think that's really awesome. Like, how many times can you say, like, I went to school with a rapper? I mean, I guess if you went to like Juilliard or something, you could say that. So I know it would mean a lot to him if you went and checked his music out. His music is available on Spotify and YouTube, and I have those links in the description. And please give him a listen. MCGtherapper, his music is really awesome. Please go give him a listen. The next film I want to chat about is the 1985 classic Clue. This is a cult classic film that I think most people I know have at least seen this movie or heard of it. But in case you don't know, Clue, the movie, is based on the board game. So it features all the characters from the board game, plus a few new ones. And basically the premise of the movie is that all the characters from the board game are invited to the home of Mr. Body. The home, the mansion, that's, you know, the board game that you're playing on. And each of these characters has a secret. And Mr. Body, he knows something about them that other people don't know, and they're kind of all like connected in a way, and they all have, you know, something they did in their past that Mr. Body like wants to expose. He wants to expose them all. So during this dinner party, this exposing party, someone is murdered. I mean, it's Clue. There's gonna be some murders. Someone's murdered, and they have to work together to figure out which one of them is the murderer. And I don't want to give everything away. I mean, I'm sure most people have seen this, but there's got to be somebody listening to this who hasn't seen it. So I don't want to give everything away. They're working together to figure out the murder. There's multiple murders. There's multiple murderers. And it's so quirky and so weird. But again, like Princess Bride, it still holds up today. You know, there's obviously some things that are outdated, but I think it still holds up, and it's still just one of those classic movies. It's very over the top. And I think I enjoy this film so much, actually, because it is a dark comedy and has dry humor and really quick lines that might go over your head if you're not paying attention, or, you know, like every time you watch it, you might pick up on something different. And I really love murder mysteries, and I think that's why I love crime shows and like true crime documentaries so much. I'm also really into the macabre, which if you don't know what macabre is, it means having the quality of or having a grim or ghastly atmosphere. So basically, it emphasizes and details the symbols and everything that has to do with death. So the Addams Family is macabre. Also another thing I love. Absolutely love the Addams Family. So I think that's why I enjoy this movie so much. The dark comedy, the dry humor, quick lines, and macabre. Everything that just makes a perfect film in my eyes. There's also notable actors in this film as well. I guess Tim Curry and Christopher Lloyd are probably the most well-known people in this movie. And Tim Curry's character, he's my favorite. He just plays it so well. He definitely has the best lines in the movie, and his just like everything about the way he plays the character is just so ridiculous and like over the top. And another reason I really love this film is because there's actually 3 different endings to the film. And if you have the movie on DVD or if you watch it on TV, you can see all 3 different endings. But actually, when the movie was released, different movie theater companies were given different copies of the movie with different endings. So you actually had to go to the different theaters that were owned by these different companies to see all 3 endings, which I think is really clever marketing. Like I mentioned earlier, the characters are so over the top, but it works. It's not over the top in a sense where you're annoyed by it. It makes it much more enjoyable, and it makes the characters more dynamic, I think. And especially when you're playing a board game, you want each character to have their own look, their own personality, and that really plays off in the film. And the film reads more as a comedy than horror, which is why I think more people like this film. And I think from the music, the costumes, the acting, everything's just so outlandish and unbelievable that it just keeps you really engaged throughout the whole movie. And I find that sometimes mystery or crime genres can drag on a little too long, and they can lean a little too serious and too dark, but this film isn't like that. It's definitely more of a comedy, and it doesn't take itself too seriously. It pokes fun at everybody. And I really enjoy seeing books or games or, written materials come to life on screen. So I think that's another reason why I like it too, because when I was a kid, I always played Clue. And then once I watched this movie, it's like, oh, that was my favorite character to play with. This is how they are in the film. And they all have their own personalities and quirks, which makes them a lot more dynamic. It's very nostalgic for me because I saw it for the first time when I was younger, and it was a movie that I always watched with my sister and always watched with my friends, and it's just something that I've always really enjoyed. And that might be one of the reasons why I actually really love the macabre and why I have a more dry sense of humor and I like spooky, creepy things. It might go back to this movie. I'm not sure. Not really sure where that came from, but maybe this is the reason why. And it's not really overly scary. I mean, there are some creepy parts, but I don't think it's an overly horror movie. It's definitely more comedy. So go check this film out, and if you've never seen it before, try to figure out who the murderer is, try to figure out who killed who, and have your own little mystery game while you're watching it. So the last film I'm going to chat about is The Nightmare Before Christmas, and I actually saw this movie for the first time back in 2014 as well. And for some reason, I never saw this movie when I was a kid. I remember seeing Jack Skellington, like his face and things from the movie like everywhere. I had a couple friends in high school who were really into it, but I never saw it. I don't know why. It might have something to do with the fact that my mom doesn't really like spooky things, so maybe she thought that we would be scared, or I don't really know. I just never saw it. So I finally watched it in college, and I instantly fell in love with it. And I think it's because, like I mentioned, I love spooky things. I love the macabre. I love Halloween. I love just like weird, spooky, creepy things like that. So I think that's kind of why I love it. And it's also a musical, and I love musicals. So that also has another plus going in there. And one standout thing about this film is that it's all stop motion. So if you don't know what stop motion is, basically you set something up, you take a picture, you move it a little, you take a picture, and you keep doing that, and you play it back, and it looks like the little things are moving. So all the characters and all of the sets and everything in this film was created by hand, and it was individually placed, individually moved to make this whole movie. And it's a Tim Burton movie, so if you like Tim Burton, if you know about his films, he always makes creepy things, and I do really like Tim Burton as well. I'm also an artist, so I'm really impressed and fascinated by stop motion, and I think it's really cool. This movie was released in 1993, which is a year before I was even born. Speaking of birthdays, I celebrated my birthday on April 28th, which was a couple of days after my last episode was released, so happy late birthday to me. And I think the fact that it's 25 or 26 years old at this point, and it's made such an impact, and so many people love this movie, and it's still doing really well, and they just had a 25th anniversary for it, and I actually got a couple of the merch items that they released for the 25th anniversary, but people still love this movie, and it still holds up, and I think it's just because it has such a nostalgic feel, which I think that's the theme. I think nostalgia is the theme of this episode, but I really love this story. And the story, it focuses on Jack Skellington, who's played by Chris Sarandon, who I mentioned earlier because he was in The Princess Bride. And again, I met him, which is crazy. And that's why I was really interested in meeting him out of everybody from The Princess Bride that was at AwesomeCon, because he's in my 2 favorite movies. So, I mean, I met someone who's in my 2 favorite movies. Like, that's crazy. I love that. And I have a little picture of Jack Skellington. He signed it in green Sharpie, and it's really cool. I could make an episode all about all the people I've met, because I've met a lot of really cool people. But anyway, Chris Sarandon voices Jack Skellington, And he lives in Halloween Town. Not Halloween Town, the Disney Channel movie, but Halloween Town, Tim Burton, Halloween Town. And he lives there with a bunch of spooky people, just spooky Halloween people, including Sally, who is played by Catherine O'Hara, who is just, I love her. If you've ever watched Schitt's Creek, she's on Schitt's Creek. She's really cool. And all the people in the world, they spend all year getting ready for Halloween. It's basically like Christmas. It's like all the little elves in the Christmas world. They spend the whole year getting ready for Halloween, which, I mean, I would move there. Everything's spooky, Halloween all the time, super cool. And Jack is the Pumpkin King, so he is the leader of Halloween Town. He's not the mayor. There is a mayor of Halloween Town he's very interesting. He's a little short little fat man who has two faces. And he's the mayor, and he, my favorite line, the mayor, he says my absolute favorite line. In the whole movie, he says, "I'm an elected official. I can't make decisions on my own." Just gonna leave that. Leave that there. It's my favorite line in the whole movie. But Jack, after they celebrate Halloween, it's their spookiest Halloween year, he realizes he wants something more. He has a feeling that there's something more out there. There's more out there for him, and he wants to feel something different. And he goes out and he kind of is doing a little exploring, and he discovers Christmas Town. Okay, same thing as Halloween Town, just Christmas. So if you're a Christmas person, I'm more of a Halloween person. I love Christmas, but if you're a Christmas person, Christmas Town is where it's at for you. And he sneaks into Christmas Town because there's like no lock on it, which I don't really get that. They don't really go into that very much, but anyway, he discovers Christmas Town, and he decides that he is going to take over Christmas. And he gets all of his little spooky friends to basically hijack Christmas. That's like, it's so funny. So that's why it's called The Nightmare Before Christmas, because they're spooky, they're creepy. Anyway, Santa Claus gets kidnapped, and the boogeyman tries to eat Santa Claus, and there's so many weird creatures and weird things in this movie that I love it. And since it's a musical, it features original music and songs, and they're so catchy. This is Halloween. What is this? And I also really love how Jack goes through a lot of character development. And he doesn't change who he is. You know, he makes a change for the better, but he doesn't compromise who he is. He's still spooky, makes a change, but he's still spooky Jack. And he has really good intentions, and I think that shows how no matter where you are, what circumstances you're in, what society thinks or tells you, you can learn from and don't have to be afraid of different, I guess, cultures and different ways of living, and you don't have to be afraid of people who are different than you. And I think that is a really good universal message. Even though this movie might be a little scary for like little kids, I think that people of all ages can really enjoy this movie. It's fun, it's spooky, it's cheerful, all in one. And I've actually been debating on getting a Jack Skellington tattoo. I know my parents are gonna like scream when they hear me say that, but I've been thinking about getting a little tattoo of him. I think he's so cute. He's really interesting. I relate to him a lot. I think that there's something in this movie that everybody can relate to and everybody can enjoy. And even if you're not really big into musicals, it's a really interesting, cool movie. And I love it because not only does it have the Halloween, the Halloween portion to it, but it has Christmas. And it's really about, looking for something out there that's different and going for it and following your dreams. And I think it's so cute. So if you haven't checked this film out, I highly recommend that you do. It's really cute, spooky, funny, and I'm sure that the music will get stuck in your head. So that's all for this episode. If you have seen these films before, I hope that you learned a few new things about them and you want to watch them again. And if you haven't seen any of these movies before, I hope that I've piqued your interest and that you will go and give them a chance, because I love all of these movies. I think that you will love them all too, and there's definitely at least one movie that I've mentioned that you're interested in seeing. Also, please remember to check out MCGtherapper as well. The links will be in the episode description. You can listen to him on Spotify and YouTube. And also check out my podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and there's a couple other places for you can listen to me as well. So, as always, stay safe, stay classy, and I will chat with you again soon. Goodbye.